Hello, and welcome to Awkward Family Conversations. This is the podcast where we try to help millennials and Zoomers try to figure this thing called life out. I am joined, as always, with my younger daughter, Addie. How are you, Add?
Hi, Dad.
When Addie was, well, I won't say when she was younger because it still does it, but she's been fascinated by astrology. And one of her current, I wouldn't say hobby, but interests is to do readings and to help friends with these astrological insights. In fact, you did a reading just yesterday, did you not?
Sure did.
Oh. What can you tell me about my astrology, Anne?
I don't have your birth time, so I can't tell you anything.
All right, very good. Well, I do know that I have many Earth signs or planets or whatever. Heavily earthbound anyway is what I know about mine. But,
yep, cannot relate. I have exactly one.
Yeah, see, that's why we work well together.
Yep.
Hello, Ad, how are you?
Hi, Dad. I'm good. I'm here with you today, my father, Rhett. And you know, I was going to actually use a different trivia, but now I'm looking over at the script here and I see that you misspelled your name this time. So my Rhett trivia is that his name is spelled with 2 T's and sometimes he even messes that up. But to go on to say that that was kind of our litmus test when landlines were still a thing that people used. If anybody called the house asking for Mr. Brett, Mr. Brott, Mr. Rach Brott one time was one of them, we knew that it was not a real caller.
It's true. I've been called many things, including Fett, and perhaps oddly, Pete.
Yeah.
I was Pete for many years in my junior high and early high school days.
And sometimes Tony.
Well, that continues to this day, Tony. So I go by many names, often and many oftentimes misspelled. Yeah, my name has been a Starbucks coffee mug thing forever, even before there were Starbucks coffee mugs where people wrote misspelled names on the cups. But, that's true. So what are we going to talk about today, Addie, in our season of work hacks?
Work. We are talking about how should I behave when I'm traveling for business.
The business trip. I told you last week I would share the story of my first business trip, which we will get into as we go through this. Have you ever taken a business trip, Ed? I guess there's probably not much call for restaurant workers or even vet techs to take a lot of business travel.
Not a whole lot, no.
No. Have you thought about? Do you have any questions or anything? What do you think would be important to know about business travel if you've never had a business trip?
Caught me off guard here, going off script, man. I guess how to prepare and how to behave would be the biggest things.
Fair enough. We can talk about both of those things. So
yeah,
we have to thank our 2 minutes of internet research has found a couple of places. Actually, there's a lot of them that actually talk about this sort of thing, and they give a wide variety of advice. But 2 of the more helpful ones that I discovered this week were Lola.com and ProTrav.com. They had some good resources on this very question about when you think about business travel, what do you do? And I'd say in general, there's a couple of overarching principles that are good to keep in mind. The first is know your organization's travel policies. Most companies, all companies, and most organizations that require business travel have policies that talk about what's appropriate for you to do, how to track, keep receipts, how to submit expense reports for reimbursements. Where companies often have agreements with hotels and airlines and other car rental places, other travel businesses. And you want to know what those are, and you want to comply with the company invests a lot of research or invests a lot of resources to develop these relationships, and it works because they can deliver volume to these partners and vendors. And so know your policies, you know, how long you have to submit expense reports for reimbursement. I used to work with some folks that would be submitting stuff 3-4 months after the fact, and that's very hard to get a complete reimbursement when you're trying to remember everything from 3 or 4 months ago. So know what you're, you know how your organization thinks about travel and what, what their expectations are there. Know what the goals are for your trip. If travel is expensive, I mean, you're paying flights or cars and hotels and meals and things that are above and beyond your kind of what the normal cost that you bring to an organization. But they're investing that money for purpose. Your business trip will have a purpose, and whether you're gathering information or going for sales or deepening a partner or a vendor, a client relationship. I mean, there's a reason that you travel. There's a reason that you're incurring additional expenses, and know what those are. Know what your goals are, know what the company wants to result from the trip. And everything you do from a business standpoint should support those goals. So in that sense, travel is no different than any other business related action, whether you're in the office and working on a project. Business travel is a similar thing. You're taking some action for an outcome, and you got to keep that in mind, and you want to be really clear on what that is. And probably the last thing I'd say, just an overarching, as you think about business travel, is that when you're out in the world and you're away from the office in a business context, you're representing the organization. You're presenting yourself, as an employee, or as a or you're connected to that organization, and you want to make sure that you're representing the organization in a way that's consistent with the way they want to be represented. So most organizations want as little friction as possible. Don't want to distract any distractions from the main goals. So everything, and we'll talk a lot about this as we go through this today. Everything you want it to be smooth. You don't want to have hiccups. You don't want to have anything that gets in the way. You don't want to be distracting from your main purpose. And remember that office and company norms still apply when you're traveling on business. Your business travel is an extension of your organization and the culture and the norms that you have in your office. So it's not a time to sort of cut loose and play fast and loose with office norms and everything. The same expectations that the company has and behaviorally in the office applies when you're representing the company on business. So I mean, those are some initial thoughts, or overarching thoughts about what if you don't have if you can't think of a specific response, if you get in a situation and you're out there, you just kind of go back to those three things. What's the policy? What am I trying to accomplish at this trip? And how does my company want me to behave? And how does it want to present? How does the company want me to be, present myself as a representative of its business? If you can keep those three things in mind, you should be able to figure out whatever it is that you need to address or answer any question that you might have. So does that make sense?
Sure does. But I gotta say, as a very type A, make a Google Doc, I never leave my house without a packing list. How do you prepare?
Well, you just said it, right? I mean, we often talk about be intentional, right? That's my answer for just about everything. And it applies here too. And all be intentional means, when I say that, is think about it ahead of time and set your purpose and then execute against that. So,
but like, what are the things that you don't think about? Because like, obviously packing list, like I'm going to write down what I need to bring, but like.
Yeah. So, know what you're going to be doing and know what you need to have on hand to do that. So, when you talk about a packing list, that's, you got clothes, you've got equipment, you've got, documents. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into a business trip than goes into personal travel. Hey, Claire, our audio intern has made her appearance. So,
screaming.
So when you're doing business travel, not only do you have to have the things you need for personal travel, meaning you need your iPhone or your mobile phone, and you need clothes and you need your toiletries and that kind of stuff. But for business, you also need anything that's required for your business interactions. And so, as you prepare for a business trip, get yourself organized the same way you would for a personal trip. And that starts with your packing list of clothes, so understand what you're going to need for clothes. And, if you can get clothes that perform double duty, because, we don't do a lot of suits and formal wear anymore in business. So that cuts a little bit of slack. It used to be that when I travel for business, I'd wear a suit, and then at night I would take off my tie and be more casual, and sometimes leave the suit jacket in my hotel room and be in my slacks and a shirt, my button-down shirt that I'd roll up the sleeves and not have a tie. And so, I could go from the office where I was wearing a tie and a suit, and then go out for dinner with colleagues or whatever in a more casual way. But know what you're going to be doing. What your meal plans are, if you're going to do any socializing or sightseeing or anything outside of business hours, and think about what you need in terms of clothes for that. And to the extent that you can double up, then that saves time. So you don't want to be heavily packed. You don't want to be dragging massive amounts of suitcases with you or everything. So be efficient in what you can do, but bring everything you are going to need. So if you planning to work out when you're on there, bring workout clothes. Don't forget your sleepwear. Oftentimes people think, oh, I'm on a business trip, I got to remember all of my stuff during the day, and you forget that you got to sleep at night. So there has been more than once where I was kind of like, oh, I didn't bring my sleep shirt with me. So I had to sleep in my t-shirt. Think about all the things that you're going to need to be doing, and think about it in terms of 24 hours, not just what you're going to be doing in the time that you're working. Some other things that you need: know how you're going to get from place to place to place to place for the entire trip. So from the time you leave your home to the time you get back to your home, know what you're going to do. So, you're going to take, if you're going to take for here, it would be, okay, I'm going to need to get from my home to my BART station. I'm going to take BART to the airport. And once I'm in the airport, I get the plane. When I land where I'm going, I need a rental car, or I need a cab or whatever to get to my hotel where I'm going to be. When I'm at my hotel, where am I going to go? How am I going to get to my workplace? If I have meetings that aren't in one office, if I'm visiting sites, for instance, how am I going to get from one site to the other? What am I going to need to do that? And make those arrangements, make those reservations. Get your directions, get your confirmation numbers, get everything together that you're going to need. So and it's all in one place. How you're going to get from one place to the next. Consolidate all the contacts when you're going to be meeting people. When you travel, typically it's to meet other people, and you're going to need to know who you're meeting with and how to get a hold of them. Because if you're running late, or if you guys get crosswise, you're going to need to be able to communicate with each other to be able to resolve those kind of issues. Remember, going back to that frictionless or as little friction as possible to get stuff done. One way to do that is prepare with your contact list, consolidate them, get them in one place, or where they're easily accessible. So that you can get all of those, they can be at your fingertips if you need to get in touch with those folks. The other thing you need to do is consolidate all of your documents. So, if you're going to be doing training materials, or if you're going to be handing out reports or presentations, make sure that you have those and they're all easily accessible and you can get to them easily. Carry enough business cards and make sure that your V card is up to date, so that you can exchange contact information easily and quickly with people that you're meeting. So, make sure you've got things that you can share.
Your what card?
What's that?
Your what card?
Oh, a V card, virtual card. Basically, it's a business thing that you would have filled out. So I have it filled out on my iPhone, and it's got my name, company, position, contact information, both telephone, emails, websites, that kind of thing. And you can just, with Bluetooth, you can exchange V-card information. So you don't actually have to hand off the business card, and then you got to store the business card and keep it. So it's in your phone. So it's an electronic version of a business card. So make sure that's ready to go as well. Make sure that your devices, so if you got a laptop, if you've got a tablet, if you've got a phone, if you got a GoPro, whatever you need for your travel, it's fully charged, ready to go. And then make sure you bring all the accessories with you. So if you've got a wireless keyboard or wireless mouse because of your laptop, You know, if you've get, you know, make sure your charging cords are all together for all of the devices that you're going to need. So, you know, make sure you've got all those, your headphones and earbuds or whatever you're using. Make sure those are all fully charged and ready to go, and that you're going to be able to, you have what you need to be able to make sure that they're usable for the duration of your trip. You know, if you've got a lot of material, you know, rather than bring that with you on a plane, send it ahead. You know, that's one of the things you don't have to worry too much with business travel. And we'll talk about this, I think, when we start talking about how, you know, who pays and how do you, you know, what's appropriate for business travel. But, you know, companies want you to, they don't want you to scrimp and sacrifice, and they don't want you to overindulge, but they want you to be able to do what you can do effectively. Again, this gets back to that frictionless experience. They want things to run smoothly. So if sending materials ahead of time will make things run smoothly, they'll incur the cost to do that. Now, make sure you have enough time. If you send something ahead of time, don't do it, you know, like, well, let's overnight something tonight because it's got to be there tomorrow. You know, do it several days ahead of time. So in case something gets screwed up, you can still address it and get it fixed. And whether you got to send it to the hotel or a local office that's there, or a client site, or wherever it is that you send it, you know, don't be afraid to send manuals and you know, other materials ahead of time, so you don't have to manage them getting on and off the plane, or, you know, in and out of the car, that kind of stuff. So that's, you know, when you talk about getting prepared for business travel, it's a little more, there's a little more to it than preparing for personal travel, just because you've got that, you know, all those dimensions. And again, you want to be prepared. You want this to be frictionless. You want to be able to handle any issues that come up very quickly. So you need all that contact information, all the materials you need, all the equipment you need, make sure that that's all squared away.
All right. And then also, as a type A and very anxious person, what determines what the company buys and what you buy?
Yeah, so, you know, this is, I think, one of those, you know, interesting questions. And it's actually pretty simple. If you're already paying for something yourself, meaning, you know, you're paying your mortgage or your rent, you know, then the company has to pay for that when you're traveling, because you shouldn't have to pay that out of pocket. You've already, you know, you're paying for your apartment or your condo or your townhouse or your home. You know, and just because you're traveling, you still have to pay that cost for your permanent home and everything. So the company should pick that up. Also, you've already bought groceries, you know, you do all that. The company feeds you, and the company pays for your transportation. You know, you're already paying your car and your insurance and gas and everything, you know. So, you know, those kind of basic expenses that you have already incurred in your normal life is what the company picks up. Also, anything specific to the business part of your trip. So, you know, if you have to host somebody for meals, you know, if you need to buy materials for a vendor or a business partner, or for yourself to do work, all that stuff goes on the company account. So, you know, the basic, we'll call it infrastructure. That's not the right word. I can't think of the right word right now, but the, you know, those basic expenses are definitely things that are
Basically,
what's that?
what's necessary to the trip.
Necessary to the trip, yeah. So that you have a place to stay, so that you eat, so that you can get from one place to another, so that you can effectively execute your duties, that you can buy whatever materials you need to effectively execute your duties. That's all appropriate to put on the company account. You know, what you pay for out of pocket personally would be essentially your entertainment expenses, right? So you're in a new city and you want to go out to a club. You know, that's not going to go on the company expense. Your dinner will, but not the drinks and the cocktails and the cover charges and, you know, whatever else that expenses you would incur. If you're going to a movie, you know, the company's not going to buy your popcorn and your pop. It's not going to buy your movie ticket. You know, those are things that you could do in your own home. You know, so if it's something that you would do that would be additional expense if you were, you know, when you're living at home, you know, in your house, in your home, then those are the kind of things that you would pay for out of pocket. You know, where it gets a little bit squishier, and this will be where your company policy is important, is, you know, if you're on the plane and you want a cocktail, right, a glass of wine. You know, I had a boss that said, you know, you worked all hard you know, you've been away on a business trip, you work a couple of days, you're coming back. I don't mind buying you a cocktail on the way home. You want a glass of wine, you want a beer, you want you know, rum and Coke or whatever it is, you know, I'll buy you a drink. I won't buy you three, but I'll buy you one. And so, Talk to your boss about it. Read your company policies. So there are going to be things like that. There was, movies in your hotel room, right? That's kind of a questionable one, right? I'm in my hotel room. It's 9 o'clock at night. I can watch a pay-per-view movie or something. It's $10 or whatever. I actually didn't do a lot of that when I was traveling, but I know other people that did. And sometimes you'd put the movie on the, because it comes on the hotel bill, and it depends what, you don't necessarily break out on your expense account, the pieces of your hotel bill. But things like, we talk, internet charges. Like if you're in the air and you want to, and there's a charge for using the internet, that's something that you can put on your company expense, assuming that you're doing it to check your business emails, things like that. And then if you use it for personal web surfing or other, it's still okay because you're using that in part for work. So, so basically it's pretty easy to draw the line of demarcation. There's a few areas, there's a few things that might be in the gray zone, but by and large, it's pretty easy. If it's an expense that you would incur yourself at home, going to see a band, then you'd pay it on the road. But if it's not an expense that you would have incurred at home, you wouldn't be going out for dinner every night. You wouldn't be, those are, your rental car, those kind of things definitely go on the company card or on the company expense. What's interesting too is the, when you talk about the money part, a lot of companies have policies that create thresholds, limits for you, because again, they don't want you to sacrifice. My bosses loved me because when I went to New York City, my dinners would be $7 and $8 because I'd walk up to Famous Ray's Pizza, get a couple of slices and a Sprite for $7, and then tip the guy. And for $8, I was getting my dinner in New York City, which is an expensive place to eat typically. They're not looking for you to do that kind of thing. I did it because I liked it. But they also don't want you sitting down and ordering, $106 bottles of wine and, eating $50 entrees with $30 salads and, desserts and everything like that too. So, oftentimes companies that I worked for, $75 a day on food was probably considered pretty reasonable, so, I'd grab a bagel and a coffee in the morning for $5. And then I'd, grab a sandwich at lunch for 10 or 12. And that would leave me about, $50, $60, for dinner. And, no matter where you are, even in New York City, you can get a pretty good dinner for $50 or $60. And so, that's something to keep in mind as you're thinking about, it's not just who's paying, but how much are they paying? And if you like it, if you like to go out to eat and that's your thing, then what you can do is, have the company buy you dinner and you buy the wine, for instance, or, something like that. If you want to have a more upgraded experience, you can certainly supplement what the company is willing to pay. You don't have to go to Bennigan's or, TGIF or whatever, just to, kind of keep keep yourself under the budget limit, if you're willing to subsidize that a little bit out of your own pocket. So, there's a few different ways to play that, but, that's, so you've kind of got to think about the actual total expense too. It's, the other thing is on my first business trip coming home, it wasn't my first business trip. It was another business trip. I was coming home and I had been traveling with a couple of guys. We'd gone out to the East Coast to do some training, and we were with a senior leader in the company. And we got to Chicago O'Hare Airport, and we lived, a couple hours away. And usually we take the bus because it was $12 or something to go from Chicago to Beloit. But this guy rented a car. And I was thinking, oh, okay, well, I guess this is what we do. And so my next business trip, I rented a car and was told very quickly after that no, that's not appropriate use. And I was like, well, but we did it the last time. He said, well, yeah, but you were 3 and that guy is a vice president. So it's a little different from an entry-level analyst renting a car for $60 or whatever it was. And, instead of waiting for 45 minutes for the $12 bus, which would have been the more appropriate answer. So, you learn, if you do screw up, you are going to get told about it. Typically the company won't make you pay for that the first time you screw up, but, be aware that there is a definite learning curve in that whole process.
All right. And who pays when there's a group?
So this is, yeah, so we, all the companies I've been at, it's a control, it's an expense control thing that you don't want anybody because all expenses have to be approved. Somebody's going to submit expenses and somebody needs to approve them. Somebody different needs to approve them. And typically it's the one-up manager. And what you want to avoid in situations like this is that if you're traveling, and typically you're not just traveling with peers, you're traveling with people at various levels in an organization. Especially early in your career, it's unlikely that they're going to send you off on a business trip all by yourself, although that's what happened to me. But it's unlikely. And so usually what would happen is whoever is the highest ranked person, title-wise, at the table would pay for it, so that they would submit the expense account to their boss, who would then look it over and approve it, review it for appropriateness, and then approve it. And so it's always the highest person. And the reason you want to do that is you don't want anybody who is benefiting from the expense to be in a position to approve the expense. So if I'm an entry-level person going out and I'm with my manager, if I take the expense on my credit card and submit it, my manager, who's there eating with me or drinking with me or doing whatever with me, would be the one to approve it. Then that creates an opportunity for us to take advantage of the company. Then we don't really have a good control step there, because my boss is benefiting from something and is in a position to just approve it without additional oversight. And so the appropriate thing there would be for my boss to submit it, to take the expense, pay for it, and then submit it to his or her boss, so that they can sign off and review it for appropriateness and then sign off on it. So it's always the highest ranked person who should pick up the tab.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
But then, last week we talked about how to behave at business related functions.
Yes.
Can you go out when you're on business travel?
Well, you can, but you don't have to. So my very first business trip was to Nashville, Tennessee. There was a trade show of industrial equipment manufacturers. I was working for an electric brake and clutch company. These were industrial applications. They weren't automotive. Well, we did do automotive brake and clutches, but they were for air conditioning units. And we also had photoelectric controls and some other industry equipment. And my first role, I was a product manager, or a lowly project. I guess I was a product. I guess they called me a product manager, but it was an entry-level position at an industrial brake and clutch manufacturer. And there was a big trade show in Nashville, Tennessee, at the Opryland Resort. And that was my very first business trip. So I, flew down to Nashville from Chicago, took the bus from Beloit down to Chicago, got on the plane, flew to Nashville, took, I think, a cab. I didn't rent a car. Took a cab to the Opryland Resort, went to my room, and basically stayed there for 3 days. Because one, I'm shy anyway, and I didn't really want to go out. And two, the Opryland Resort, there wasn't really anything around it. I mean, being in Nashville, you know where that is. This is 40 years ago.
There's still not much around it. It kind of is its own thing.
Yeah, so 40 years ago, it really was kind of off by itself. And I wasn't one to go to spas, and I certainly wasn't one to go to bars. Well, I would go to bars if I had friends, but I would never go by myself. So I basically spent the entire time there watching TV, ordering room service, and that was pretty much it. But kind of the rule of thumb is, when you're on business travel, you're probably going to be devoting more time than you normally would to business activities, because typically you're going to hang out with work people. And as we talked about last week, any time there is somebody from your work present, it is a work event, and the rules of the office apply. The business norms apply whenever there's somebody, business related, who's present, even if it's not an official business. The topic and the things you're talking about aren't official. So if you're going out to dinner with your colleagues because you don't know anybody else, and you're kind of hanging out with the people that you're there with, that becomes a business thing. So the business part of business travel typically sucks up most of your waking hours, but you are under no obligation. Once the business stuff is done, you're under no obligation to stay there. In fact, you don't have to go out to dinner with everybody. You're going to get up, you're going to work all day, or work through your, whatever you're doing. And when it comes to a stopping point, you actually are free to leave and do something else. And this works if you're in a place where you know people in college that you want to catch up with, or family members, or things like that. Then you can beg off and don't feel bad about that. Typically, though, most people don't have those obligations or those connections, and so they tend to stick with the people that you're with. And I would say probably about a quarter of the people that I've traveled with have begged off on social activities with their work, with their colleagues in a work setting. But most people, it's kind of like you just go from, our case, the office back to the hotel to clean up, and then go out to dinner, and then maybe back to the hotel, sit in the bar, have a drink before you go to bed. And so the days would be long. We start at 7:30 in the morning, and we'd be done with dinner and drinks probably 9 o'clock at night. So in those kind of situations, the entire day is business. And because you're working with, you're present with people who you work with, those are business functions. And so your business norms and those things are there. But having said that, it would have been totally acceptable for me to say, you know what, I'm going to meet a friend of mine, or I've got to get, I've got something else, or I'm feeling tired or anything, and beg out of those after those non-work type commitments. And if you do that, it's just like being home. If you want to go out to eat by yourself, you want to have room service in your room, you can do that. You want to go to a museum, you want to go to a sporting event. I've gone, we've been on business trips and decided, oh, you know what, I'm going to go see the baseball game. I'd like to see the ballpark in the city. And it's no different than being at home. So it can be hard to kind of break away and carve out time for yourself, but it's totally appropriate to be able to do that. When you are traveling, and you don't have to stay locked up, but you want to be responsible. Again, if somebody you work with is present, it's a business function, and so keep it business-like. That's not the time to go get, start doing tequila shooters and going to topless bars or any other kind of, any kind of other, less appropriate places to be with people that you want to have a certain professional distance with. Also be respectful always. You're not going to know. You're not going to know everybody, even if you're traveling with people from work, you're not going to know everything about them. And so oversharing is often, a lot of times what happens, people get into trouble at work because they tend to blur personal and professional boundaries during business trips. And part of that is because, the days are long, there's a lot of stress, you're in an unfamiliar environment, you're out of your routine. You're with the same people for 10, 12, 15, 18 hours all the time for several days in a row. And, it's tough to keep that professional distance during those kind of, as you get tired and as you share that kind of time. But it is important to remember that these are still business functions, and the office norms still apply. But it's also true that, I got energy. I want to go out and see this new place. This is a great city. I want to know what the nightlife's like. But remember what I've told you before, that if you want to hoot with the owls at night, be ready to soar with the eagles in the morning. I had a boss that told me that once, and it was like, all that means is be responsible, be thoughtful. Don't do anything at any point in your business trip that's going to keep you from being able to do your best the next day, or at any point. The company is paying you to be there, representing them, representing the firm, representing your organization for the entirety of your trip. And make sure that you're doing that, and you're not compromising your ability to do that by going out and getting hammered or staying out till 4 a.m. because you were in a club and it was fun and you met new people. Be responsible. Go out to the club for sure if you want, but get home by 11 and get to bed so that you're rested and ready to go the next morning. Be ready to soar with the eagles. And if you can't do that, then don't go hooting with the owls.
Ridiculous. And just like the final question that I have for you, what are just like general rules that you can apply here?
Well, again, the biggest one is business travel is just an extension of the office. So the kind of behaviors that you would do when you're in the office with your colleagues would be the kind of behaviors that you want to be consistent with on the road. And we just talked about how that can be hard sometimes because the business travel, is tiring, which means that it's hard to keep up those professional boundaries. just because it takes that energy, and you don't, you don't have an injury, especially for an extended business trip. Your Uncle Sean used to work as an engineer. He was living in the West Coast, and on Sunday morning at 11, he would go to the airport and he'd take a flight all the way, to Washington, D.C. And he'd get in at 9 o'clock at night because he'd lose 3 hours and it's a 6-hour flight. And, he'd get into his extended stay place, go to work at, 7 in the morning on Monday. And, again, when you're on the road, you're out of your norm. You don't have your normal friendships and people you connect with. And especially if you're West Coast, East Coast. When I used to go back to East Coast, to either to New York or Boston, typically when I was with Schwab, 6 o'clock at night, when I was done with my work at 5:30 on the East Coast, that was only 2:30 on the West Coast. So I had lots of people that I could still interact with. And the people I typically would work with are still working, and they're sending emails and they're leaving voicemails. And so I would work until 8:30 at night, usually. I'd be up at 6 in the morning, which was really 3 in the morning my time. Have my coffee bagel cleaned up, go to the office, be there by 7:30, 4 to 8, leave there at 5, and then be in my hotel room and work another 3 hours because, people were still working where, on the West Coast where I was. So, that can really be draining. And because it's tiring, and because you're out of your normal social things and families, you're just out of your rhythm. You really can sort of let those professional boundaries go. That's probably the biggest risk in business travel, is letting those professional boundaries go. But don't. I mean, really, to be effective on the road, you need to honor those professional limits. And so, it just means be on time, dress appropriately, make sure that you're not doing things that are going to compromise your ability to continue to represent the company, for the work that needs to be done while you're there. Be ready, make sure that you've got energy. I don't drink a lot of caffeine. And one of the reasons was because I knew that when I went back east, I was going to need a boost of energy because, I'd be getting up at my time. I'd be getting up at 3 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, and, trying to work all day. And so I would drink coffee then to get that caffeine. And because I wasn't normally drinking it, it gave me a boost. So I could have that energy when I engaged with the people I needed to work with. And so, you want to make sure that you're eating well and making sure that you're, staying hydrated and all those very basic things, so that you can, you want to manage your energy so that you can, be at your best for your entire trip. We often worry. When I was traveling I told you a little bit about my trip, my first trip, where I was just holed up in a room. And I also told you that I'm kind of a cheap guy because, I'm a cheap date because I like pizza, and slice of pizza in New York City will run you a couple bucks. And so you can get a pretty good dinner, pretty filling dinner, I should say. It's probably not healthy, but a pretty filling dinner for $6, $7, $8 on the street in New York, as you know firsthand. You can get a pretty good piece of pizza, even at midnight on a Saturday.
Yeah.
But you got to eat it off the top of a trash can. I don't think your mother's forgiven me for that, frankly. But anyway, spend what you need to spend. Don't overindulge. Don't scrimp. But you don't need to. Don't sacrifice because your company is going to. The company wants you to have the resources to be able to do what you need to do. But you also owe them an obligation, a responsibility to be a good steward of the company resources. So don't indulge yourself at company expense, but make sure that you're not sacrificing either. So find that middle road. And those will be fine. So the other thing just to remember is just to relax and be yourself, and I think we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves that, I got to behave in a professional way. And we've talked about this in previous podcasts, that you can be yourself and still behave professionally. I mean, you can be authentic, you can be fun, you can be interesting, you can share your personality and be true to yourself. But you have to do it by while still respecting boundaries. And you meet somebody new, you're not going to tell them your deepest, darkest secrets. So it's the same thing in business. And so even when you're traveling, you're meeting new people, you're working with people maybe that you don't know as well, or you're getting to know people in a much more in a deeper way. Just be conscious of those professional bounds, but you got to relax and let yourself be yourself. I mean, you can really get wound up, trying to fit into, geez, am I doing this appropriate thing? If you're following the rules that we kind of laid out here, um, just relax, know that you're, that you're doing okay, and enjoy the time, enjoy the experience, learn from it, and don't sweat it so much. So, kind of pay attention, be intentional, behave appropriately. Business travel is an extension of the office. So the kind of behaviors that you'd expect to have in the office are the kind of things that you'd want to do on site. Make sure you're organized, make sure you're ready to handle anything that might come up, quickly and effectively. And you don't lock yourself in the room. You don't have to do that. Um, but I think it's important to remember that you can be yourself and still be very professional. It's about that professional distance, that emotional distance. When we talk about professionalism, really what we're talking about is an emotional distance. You're not going to bring a lot of emotion and a lot of connection. Have we talked about The Madness of King George, the movie?
I think so.
It's a great movie around. Well, it's an excellent movie, period. What basically the plot is that King George, I think it's the third, so pre-revolutionary, pre-revolutionary times. So the British king, George III, suffered what appeared to be breaks, mental breaks. And there's conjecture that it was caused by lead poisoning and things like that, because of course they're drinking out of fully leaded bottles. They're decanting their wines and meads and everything in fully leaded crystal and stuff like that. So, some of that is leaching into the things, and he was susceptible. That's the theory. But basically the movie covers a time when the King of England, who's he's the monarch and he's the one who's in charge, is crazy, and you've got this household, you've got the court that's trying to figure out, okay, we've got to run this country with a guy that's running around naked in the castle keep. So we got to kind of keep him out of sight and keep him tamped down. We got to figure out what's wrong with him, but we still got to run this empire that we got. And he's still got to get decrees. We got to get decrees out. We got to make sure that nobody knows that he's crazy, because that creates risk. And now you've got the court, all this intrigue, and that distracts from business and collecting taxes, and nobody's paying taxes because the king's crazy. I mean, you've got this great situation from for a movie, for drama. But what was really neat about this is they had you had the sort of the Queen's staff, the household staff, and then you had the military staff, his guard, and most of the guards were stoic and tried to ignore studiously ignored the fact that the king was mad and was going around crazy. But there was one guard who was, in his humanity, wanted to soothe the king, because the king was very agitated and he wanted the king to be healthy. And so he basically he broke character. He broke the role of a guard and became more of a person to the king, somebody who was, he could establish a personal relationship with the king. So this is that emotional distance, right? He broke the emotional distance wall, connected with the king emotionally, helped the king come back from this psychic break, psychological break that the king had. And at the end, when the king was now healthy and more normal and able to function in his role, the one guy, the guard that had helped him, was sent away and reassigned to some outpost somewhere far away, because he had seen the king at his most vulnerable, and he was a risk to the king because he knew, the king had shared fears and things with him, and so he had to go. He had made the emotional connection, but he was no longer. He made the king uncomfortable, and from a risk management standpoint, he had to go. And so, it's a great movie, and I've kind of given away the overarching plot, but the way they have done this was remarkable, and it was basically no good deed goes unpunished. But the folks that had ignored it, including the captain of the guard, the folks that had ignored the madness and continued to respect the office, in other words, they kept their professional distance, their emotional distance for professionalism, they were the ones that were rewarded because they had demonstrated that they could function, even in this incredibly unstable environment, they could function as they were supposed to in the roles that the organization had spelled out for them. So, I mean, that's one interpretation of this excellent movie. But you know, I recommend you actually see it. It's a really well done movie, and it really does get to the question of duty versus humanity, and it's a really good exploration of that of that dimension. I mean, it's a great movie with a lot of other things going on too, but in that dimension, it's the one that has always kind of resonated with me. That you know, you can step out of your character, out of your role in an organization to help somebody, but it does put you at risk when the organization returns to functioning as normal. You didn't function the way the organization wanted you to, and therefore you need to be dealt with. You know, there was also just the vulnerability. They didn't want somebody who had seen the king at his most vulnerable, who couldn't ignore it, to continue to be in that role. So anyway, long story there, but a really good, I think, way to think about this professional distance, and what is, when people say what's a professional behavior. Go see The Madness of King George and think about it with that in mind. You know, what is an appropriate professional response? You know, what do we? It doesn't diminish us to be dutiful in these roles, but there is a sacrifice that needs to be made. There's an emotional sacrifice. You're not going to get to the level of intimacy and therefore deeper connection in a professional setting, because that's not what the professional setting is for. The professional setting is coming together as a group of people with highly divergent backgrounds, all organized around one point, and all of the other stuff that doesn't apply to that isn't relevant. You know, your religion, your background, your culture, your history, none of that matters when it comes time to delivering widgets on time to clients who are paying for them. So, you know, you're in a professional setting, you're all about the common goal, and you don't really want to bring stuff into that setting that will disrupt that. And so, you know, when we talk about professional distance and or professionalism, what we're really talking about is that emotional distance. You're not bringing all of you into that relationship. You're just bringing the piece of you in that contributes to that goal. And that doesn't mean you can't be authentic. It just means that you're not going to share everything. And so, you know, that's something to kind of keep in mind. That's probably the most important thing. And when we talk about business and organizations and work, that's the thing to remember, that it's not about you, the whole person. It's about the person it's about the part of you that can contribute in that environment. And that's all that you're really obligated to bring. You can bring other things, and you're going to establish relationships, and you'll have some of your best friends will be people you've worked with. But that's sort of beside the point. Those are incidental. That's not the reason you're there. And remembering that, I think, is really kind of an important point as we kind of go through season 3 here, and we're talking about work hacks. You know, a lot of it's going to come back to the fact that, you know, there's a lot of you that you don't bring to the workplace, and that's okay. You don't have to bring 100% of you 100% of the time. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
How do you feel about that?
Feel a little weird sometimes. I don't love the idea of not being able to be a human if someone is in trouble. Well,
you've got to be you. The other thing to remember is, if you're a person who values that human connection, then make that human connection. Just recognize that it comes with risk in that kind of environment, because that's not why you're there. And it may pay dividends. Example, case in point. You know that my boss killed himself, right?
Yes, you very casually threw that into like episode 2.
Yeah. So that was an incredibly traumatic experience for everybody who was involved. You know, at the end of that week, so you know, my boss reported to the CFO, who was a guy I had reported to previously. So, you know, I knew Joe, I thought, really, really well. You know, certainly at that time, I wouldn't say that we were friends today, but we had been friends, and we were friends at that point. So, you know, I worked for a guy who worked for him, and I knew Joe previously in a work situation, and we had connected in many other ways as well. And after Rob died, that week was very, very tough. He had died on Friday the week before. I learned about it on Tuesday. It was the day after President's Day, and that week was just emotionally devastating, draining. And I was the guy that I had to step into Rob's role, and I had to navigate all of the emotion around, somebody that we knew, reasonably well. We'd been working with the guy for 6 or 8 months. He died and he killed himself, and so it was very traumatic. And so the Friday at the end of the week, I called Joe, CFO, and I said, Joe, the only guy who could possibly have had a harder week than me would be you. Why don't we go get a couple of beers and talk, just the two of us? And he said, great idea. Let's do that. And so we went out and we, sat for a couple hours and had a couple beers each. And then we got on the BART train and commuted, because he lived in Walnut Creek too, and we commuted. And, we were able to have that very human moment. And it was really powerful, to be able to do that. I didn't suffer any career consequences because of that. So it's possible to reach out and to connect emotionally with people you work with, but it's not the thing that you bring every day. Kind of hold that for special occasions. And if you feel the need to do something like that, by all means do it. Don't hold yourself back from being the person you really are. When those situations come up that you absolutely have to, but don't come into your work every day saying, hey, I want to connect with you on a deep emotional level. That's not why you're there. You're there to you're there to provide healthcare to animals. And I don't care who you voted for in the last election. I don't care where you go to church on Sunday, or whatever you do Sunday morning. I don't care, who you date, or none of that matters to delivering healthcare to animals in Nashville. So, you can share that stuff, but you don't have to, and you don't have to do it to be effective. And so again, be authentic, be yourself. Just don't be all yourself all the time. Mm-hmm. So I think that brings us to the end of our podcast today. We got into some very meaty, deep things here.
Sure did.
So, but there was still no swearing, so no Venmo. Do we have anything we need to research? I don't think we do.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Except you guys have a homework item. You need to see The Madness of King George.
Apparently, yes.
It's about 20 years old now. I think Nigel Williamson is an excellent actor. It's really, really good. I highly recommend it. So that's what so that's business travel. What are we talking about next week?
Next week, we're talking about what should I do when things are going wrong at work, which we might get some swearing Venmos on the board there.
When things are going wrong. Okay. Well, maybe you'll be able to contribute some content next week.
I've got lots of experience in that.
Okay. Very good. All right. So when things going wrong, sweet. Okay. We'll talk about that next week.
All right. Sorry, creepy bug just flew in. Ah! All right, we're good.
You get a lot of bugs in the South. Anywhere there's humidity, you're going to get bugs.
I don't have screens right now, too. So
I thought you were going to get screens.
I was, and then I got screens, and then I didn't get the right thing, so I still haven't fixed them. I have screen and spline, but I don't have frames, so I need to get some frames.
All right.
Anyway, next week we're talking about, obviously, what should I do when things are going wrong at work, and in the meantime, you can find us on awkwardfamiliesconversations.com, on YouTube at Awkward Family Conversations for the full unedited video clip. You can listen to us on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, wherever you like to listen for the slightly edited audio podcast. And you can find us on social media at Twitter at Awkward Family C1 and on Facebook at Awkward Family Conversations. Let us know what you think. Keep the questions and suggestions coming via DM, comments, and of course, those personal text messages. Thank you to our 6 listeners.
We're growing. We used to only have 4, so
Woo.
There you go. Excellent. Right. Well, it was nice to see you as always, Ed. And nice to see you too. I love you. We'll see you next week.
I love you too, Dad.
All right. Bye-bye.